Hard to believe we are at day 4 already, and I originally had it labeled as day 5, so I guess my time off is having great effect as I have absolutely no idea how long I've been away. Today we started off by having a quick drive to Sandringham House. It took roughly an hour to get here. There's no footage of us driving to Sandringham because I've got the SD card for the GoPro at Easton, but also luckily I had one in the back of the car. So anyways, I didn't remember that afterwards, but there's a little bit of driving through Sandringham Park. Sandringham House was built between 1870 and 1892 and was built for Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, by his parents as a way to get him out of London and away from all the ladies. Only problem is, from what we were told at the house, is he brought the ladies with him. The site has been occupied since Elizabethan times, when a large manor house was constructed, which was replaced in 1771 by a Georgian mansion for the Host Henleys. The house was purchased in 1836 by John Motteux, a London merchant who had no direct heirs, and so on his death the estate was left to Charles Spencer Cowper, who set about rebuilding at Sandringham. He led an extravagant life, and by the early 1860s the estate was mortgaged and they spent most of their time on the continent. The estate in 1862 was then home to Albert Edward and his wife Princess Alexandra of Denmark. Between 1870 and 1890 the house was completely rebuilt in the style of Frantic Jacobean, as the couple and the house that stood at the spot was very damp. Edward also developed the estate, making it the finest shoot in England. The house was inherited by George V, who described the house as dear old Sandringham, the place I love better than anywhere else in the world. It was the setting for the very first Christmas broadcast in 1932, and George died in the house in 1936. The estate passed to Edward VIII and was purchased by George VI, writing to his mother, "I have always been so happy here, and I love the place," and he died at Sandringham in 1952. And as we all know, the Queen spends her Christmases here and stays at the estate until after the anniversary of her father's death in February. The first televised Christmas broadcast was from Sandringham Library in 1957, and in the 1960s plans were drawn up to demolish the house and replace it with a modern building, but it was not to be. It was lovely to wander around and see all the treasures they had collected over the years. Queen Victoria's shotgun is in the gun hallway, various awards given to Prince Philip in the sitting room, along with a table laid out for the Queen's tea with Baddington Bear, complete with marmalade sandwiches, which was a rather special way to start the day. Next, it was off to Houghton Hall. Houghton, actually Houghton, was built in the 1720s for Great Britain's first Prime Minister, Sir Robert Walpole. This is one of Norfolk's most beautiful stately homes and remains one of England's finest Palladian houses. The architects were Colin Campbell and James Gibbs, with interiors by William Kent. During the 18th century, Walpole also amassed one of the greatest collections of European art in Britain, and the hall became a museum to the collection. On Walpole's death, Houghton was passed to his son and then to his grandson, the 3rd Earl of Orford. He was first to sell Sir Robert's picture collection to Catherine the Great of Russia due to his gambling debts. The house was then inherited by the first Marquess of Cholmondeley. They did not live in the house for long, but moved back to their ancestral seat in Cheshire. Houghton was frequently on the market during the next century and was rented out to a succession of tenants from 1884 to 1916, when the 5th Marquess of Cholmondeley and his wife, Sybil, took on the house just after the First World War and restored it to its former glory. Houghton Hall is well known for its shell bed hung with green velvet and embroidered with silver and gold, along with silver and gold tassels. Venus's shell is also on the headboard, which is then also echoed in the ceiling. Fabulous little house. Enjoy the rest of the pictures, and I will chat to you again once we get to Holkham. Holcombe Hall, my goodness, it was busy here today. I think everyone came out for the day. This is another 18th century Palladian style house based on the design of William Kent and built by Thomas Cook, 1st Earl of Leicester. Cook is spelt Coke, but it's pronounced Cook, not Coke. So there we go. Sir Thomas Cook was the 1st Earl of Leicester. He went on his grand tour for 6 years, returning to the house with a newly acquired book collection, but also an art and sculpture collection to furnish the planned mansion. He amassed some debts later on and never saw the house to completion, but stated in his will that his wife, Lady Margaret Tufton, would oversee the finishing house upon his death. Instead of going straight back to Easton this evening, we took a little detour via Wells Next the Sea, so called because it's not actually on the sea, but in a little cove next to the sea. Very practical. It was very busy, so we didn't stop for an ice cream. We just did a little drive through. And no adventure is complete without a visit to a sunken church, as it were. So it was off to Rutland Reservoir, originally named Eppingham Reservoir after a local village. The reservoir was completed in 1978 and covers 3,100 acres. The village of Hambleton was surrounded by fields, but by the 1970s the scene would change entirely. Hamilton Peninsula would turn into the largest man-made lake in the UK. The village of Hamilton and most of Middle Hamilton was actually left intact when they started making the reservoir. The wells for the villages were plugged up and the reservoir was created by flooding these two villages, created from the River Nen and the River Welland. Normanton Church, as seen in a picture somewhere, was a local church of these villages, appears to be floating on the water when the reservoir is full, which, based on the heat in the UK, it's not at the moment. There was a public outcry in the 1970s to save Normanton Church when destruction plans were drawn up and the plans to flood the area were set in motion. The church was deconsecrated and scheduled for demolition. The local area protested to leave the church intact, and once the area had been flooded. The lower levels of the church were filled with rubble and then topped off with concrete to create a new floor. The church would then become a small island once the reservoir was filled and a causeway was built connecting it to the shore. It now plays as a backdrop to wedding photography, along with being a museum, and you can even get married in it. It is set up for weddings with chairs and things in it, if you so wish. It just gave me the collywobbles, really. Someone was later telling us as well that there's a skeleton in the church somewhere. Not, gives me the collywobbles. I can't stand it. Anyway, very fascinating piece of history though, and very interesting to see a church floating on a lake with wind sails upon it as well. Heebie-jeebies. And finally, on the way back to Easton, we had a quick little stop at RAF Wittering and took a picture of the Harrier jumper jet on the side of the A1 highway. This nifty plane can take off vertically, much like a helicopter, and doesn't need a runway. Rather fascinating. Do check it out on YouTube. It's very cool. And they'll tell you how it was developed and why it was developed and all that sort of stuff. So there we are. That is day 4, not day 5. Have a fantastic evening, friends, and I will chat to you tomorrow. Bye.